So, I have a confession to make. Hello everyone and welcome to my sewing studio. In this video I will be going over the beginnings of my Symington corset, the Pretty Housemaid. Let's start with the confession. This video and the first one on my channel has been about a year in the making. I took a lot longer than I wanted to, and I ended up having to pause to take care of my health. I finally found a chiropractor that diagnosed my neck injury and really focused on that. Previously, I was trying to deal with the pain on my own, and making a corset is one of the things that I thought of that might help with that pain. I ran into the problem of the chicken or the egg, which to do first, because as I worked on the corset, it caused more, like sewing, caused more pain in my shoulders, and at the time I didn't know why. But I also hoped that the corset would help relieve that pain, so it was like, which do I deal with first? And because I found the chiropractor, I ended up focusing on the pain first, and that's why this project was kind of put aside for a while. But I'm ready to pick it up now. I saw this video by Morgan Donner and thought, if wearing a corset is more comfortable for her than a bra, maybe it would not only be more comfortable for me, but actually help some of my neck and shoulder pain because I wouldn't have the bra straps digging into my shoulders all the time. So I started this journey, learned as much as I could about corsets. Like, I went deep down the rabbit hole, watching every video I could about corsetry and how to make historical corsets versus modern corsets, and decided that the Pretty Housemaid sounded exactly like what I wanted. So, with that pattern in mind, I bought Corsets, Historical Patterns and Techniques by Jill Salin, and used the pattern from this book because I wanted the pattern for the Pretty Housemaid specifically. This pattern was taken from the extant Pretty Housemaid corset in the Symington collection. It was as true to the original as I knew of. So the first step of my plan was to make a lining out of quilting cotton and then use that as my mock-up. So get the pieces to where they're a good fit, and then use the fabric so it doesn't go to waste, and then have the strength layer be denim, and use this first version of the corset as a wearable mock-up that, if it does fit well, I can continue to use. While comfort is one of my first priorities, and of course pain relief being included in comfort, another priority I have is the silhouette. It's a secondary priority, but I really like the hourglass shape that they had in the 1890s, which is when this corset was made, and so I figured that if I am going to dip my toes into history bounding and wear a corset for comfort anyway, then having that silhouette underneath would give the desired look that I personally like and want. And now that all my disclaimers of why the footage doesn't look the same as my room is now is out of the way, let's get into making this corset. This is the book that I got my pattern from. I'm using the Pretty Housemaid corset as what I'm starting with. I went to my local library and had them enlarge the pattern in the book 200%, and then I added where I needed to enlarge the pattern on each piece. And I am ready to cut out my first mock-up. One of the difficulties I'm having is that it's hard to tell where the waistline is. On this piece you would think it would be here, because this is where the eyelets are closest together. So that typically is where the bunny ear would form, where you would tighten the corset the most, so that would be the waistline. But when I try to match it up to my body, it doesn't seem to fit there, so Not sure what I'm going to do with that, but that's the reason for a mock-up. I think to start, I'm going to use these as an indicator of grain line, the grid that comes on the paper, and we'll see how it works from there. If I have to cut out different pieces again, I will, but I'm hoping I'll be able to just use the mock-up that I have for a full corset. So this first mock-up is going to become the lining of my practice corset, and then I want to use old denim jeans with no stretch because my final fabric is a cotton twill. So denim very closely mirrors that. And I want to use generous seam allowance because it doesn't seem like what I have added is quite enough. My dress form is currently 1 inch bigger than I am on a lot of measurements, so I'm hoping the corset will help reduce that to my actual size, but I also have other fit issues going on right now. So one thing at a time. I'll start with the two pieces that I know for sure go on the edge. And this is a quilting cotton that I'm using for my lining currently, my mock-up fabric. I'm using glass vase fillers. They're like small glass rocks, kind of, as my pattern weights for now. If I use enough of them, they are heavy enough, but on their own, they're lighter than I thought they would be. But so far they've seemed to do well. And the first thing I'm going to do is trace out what I currently have with chalk. There we are. I'll actually need another set of those to encase the busk. I don't have a busk right now, so I think I'll wait. Oh, and I'm also going to need to trace the other side. So let's move this. Don't forget. funky on this one. Oh, it's very, very different than the others. This one was printed more to slant like this, as opposed to the grain line here, or the grid line, I guess. I wonder if it would actually... No, not really. Well, I think because I really want that extra room on this piece, I'm going to cut it off. Maybe I have some on the other end. This is a remnant, so one edge was straight, the other was not. There we go. Perfect. So I shouldn't have tried to fit them all perfectly on one side. Oh well. So I turned it around, so I am also going to turn this around. I'm going to put it down like that. Good. Match the grain line there. That looks good. There's no direction to this fabric. I just have a habit of keeping things going in the same direction whenever I can. I also usually like to piece everything together on the fabric as close as possible so that I don't have fabric waste and a bunch of little scraps. However, for this, I'm going to have to do... I want that wiggle room for this one, so I want lots of extra seam allowance, which means a bit of waste. But it's better to try it on a quilting cotton and get it right on a mock-up than to cut into my final fabric. Because one of my layers, I really want to use a very expensive silk charmeuse that I bought a long time ago for a specific project that I would no longer fit. So I thought, what better than to use it on a beautiful corset? I have pinned on half of the pieces onto Felicia and then drawn with blue chalk, which you can't really tell the difference too much, but these are the old lines of the pattern that I cut. These are the new lines. So I've done that to each pattern piece. I followed the curve of the top for the most part, going all the way around. And it doesn't quite meet in the back, like by a lot, but I figured it was a better place to start than what I had before. And the only problem is that I have a much more exaggerated sway back than I've gotten on my mannequin this far, and then I have more of a tummy than I've managed to get on my mannequin. So while this cover fits me perfectly, it's not the same exact shape as I am. But that's what I have to work with for now. I think it gives me a better idea of at least where on the body each part of the corset is supposed to sit, because the pattern did not come with a waistline, so I had to guess that as well. But it looks like there's definitely an underbust point. That's what I was following while getting the pattern fitted. I'm hoping that that will make a difference. Next, I'm going to pin together these 4 pieces that go across the side and bust, and then I'll stitch them before adding the other, like the hip gore to the bottom, and then the front bust and back panel. So I pin them at the top here so that I don't get confused which order and which direction they face, especially since this one, after I altered it, doesn't look anything like the original. You can see the blue lines here versus the white lines here. And it was a little confusing which way it was supposed to go. I had to pull out my other one that I had already sewn up and compare it. But now I'm ready to pin. So I'm going to start at the top of each panel and pin pointing downwards so that when I sew, all of the seams will be in the same direction from the bottom up. I'm starting in the corner here and then making sure the blue lines match. That way I can make sure the lines perfectly match up at the seams. Once we get to the straight edge, it should, like that. There we go. And from this point down, it's a fairly straight line, so it should be already lined up. Fingers crossed. There we go. One seam pinned. Now I'll do this to the rest and go stitch it up. I have now sewn all of these pieces together, added the bust core, and pinned the back piece, front piece, and the whole other side. So what I'm going to do on this seam is do a French seam to encase a piece of boning that I have to test the fit and make the front flat while I fit it so that I can see what size of busk I need. So I'm going to leave, I think it's 1/4 inch. Get out the bone I have. Alright, that will fit in the casing if I stitch it along where my normal seam line is against the edge of my foot. That should be 1/4 inch roughly. I think if I did this right. This is my first time doing a French seam. So now you're supposed to trim the edge and fold it over. I don't need this to be on the outside as I fit it, so I think it's alright. I'm not going to change this seam, so I don't need this extra fabric here anyway. So I'm just going to trim it down. It's a little wonky because the pins made it not straight, but it'll be fine, it's good enough. First I'm going to press it flat the way I sewed it. Just set the stitches. I'm going to flip it inside out. There we go, a nice straight seam. Again, I'm going to put this right at the edge of my presser foot. pivot and go back and forth a couple times. There we go. Now I can sew down these other seams. From the bottom up, even if it means I have to squish the corset under the machine. Now we can slip this bone into the convenient little channel we made here. I believe this is 12 inches long. The pattern looks like it's longer, but we'll see how it looks up against my body. I've got a better fit on my dress form so far. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. I'm ready to go transfer it to paper, but I wanted to show you guys really quick. I was having problems on these two pieces here. So this would be the side piece where it comes to meet the back, and the side piece where I guess the third panel for the bust, but it kind of curves toward the back. The problem I was having was that the grain line, like I didn't know which direction to make the grain line in. I didn't know if the grain line was supposed to be parallel to every other panel or if it was supposed to follow the grid on the pattern piece. I read an article on Foundations Revealed that showed that this piece is meant to slant toward the back, and that helps it to hug this curve. So I've gone ahead and done that, and you can see there's a huge difference between what I did there and what I had going on here. I was trying to make it more parallel, but the shape ended up completely different to what the pattern actually was, especially on this piece, and it looks really wonky and different. And then you'll notice the back doesn't line up whatsoever, whereas this side the back line is straight, so it looks good. I'm happy with how this side turned out. I'm gonna go and trace the pattern pieces so that I can match it on this side. catch you up on what I've done. I retraced all of the chalk marks and re-sewed everything together. I left the steel bone in the middle because I still need to figure out the bust size. And then on this half, I have already sewn some channels. I don't know how well you can see them, but I'm going to do the other side so you guys can see how I did it. I basically am just folding the seam allowance to one side and stitching parallel to the current seam line, and then that becomes a boning channel. For the bottom, I am putting a little cross section so that the boning doesn't go too far. And I'm going to do that to the rest of the channels. So I'm going to cut this way, and then this way, and then the edge. And this is actually how I cut my nails as well, just kind of rounding off the edges like that. So look at that, I've been practicing for years. Nail file. So this is the nail file that I'm using my finger to keep the file straight. Try not to file my own nails. I do like the length of them right now. Rather not mess them up. I don't know if that's too sharp a point, like it's rounded. It'll be fine. The next problem I have to solve is how I'm going to lace this up. It is recommended that you have an eyelet tape that you can swap out between corsets and mock-ups, like specifically mock-ups. You'd want to put actual eyelets into your final corset. But since one, I plan to use the mock-up as a corset, and two, this is my first time making a corset, I don't yet have eyelet tape. So now that we've caught up to present day, this is where I am with the corset, and I want to catch you up on the things, the little parts that I've worked on in the meantime. The last thing that I had recorded was cutting the bones. So now I have them all inserted, and I actually took my iron and I put it on this setting which allows the steam to come out of this end. It's not plugged in right now. I couldn't film doing this because the steam would just fog up the camera, so I basically draped it over like a metal pole that I have, similar to the dress form stand, and steamed the bones to try to help them curve, put it on my body to get the right shape, and I really like the results. The next thing I did was add in lacing to the back. I did not put eyelets because I'm still not sure if this piece is right, so I didn't want to poke holes in it. So what I ended up doing was putting rickrack on the side of the boning channel and then lacing the laces through every other like gap in the rickrack, and I just did that by hand. It works. It's not the best, but this is just to be able to try it on, so it works for the purposes I had in mind. The only problem I'm really having, like, this is still not quite hugging the sway back yet, but now that Felicia is the same shape as me, it's a lot easier to see what's going on, because when I had this on myself, I couldn't see what was going on in the back. So now I can see this still needs to be brought in. I've been doing a lot of research into how to adjust for sway back, and a lot of what I'm seeing is to take like a wedge out of these back and side pieces. Everything in the front I'm really loving the fit of. I have a bra in here right now. It's an old bra that I don't wear anymore, but it's got it's a push-up bra, so it's got padding, and I'm thinking since the Victorians added padding to their corsets, I may as well too. So that'll give the shape that I want, and I think once I make that adjustment with the wedge here, that it'll get rid of this wrinkling that's happening here. I might have also adjusted the grain line a little too much because I didn't have the right shape on Felicia. So I might take this piece completely off, readjust it, take out that wedge, and then see how we're doing. But I think we're really close. It's not the way the other ones looked. The other ones look like they go to the middle point. Which would be here. There. Okay. That there. This here. I like that. Okay. So that's what we end up with. Now, I do want to compare that to the original. So it makes it shorter, but it keeps the angle the same. So I think that's actually a good thing. I'm also questioning if I want it to be that wide, because my lacing gap was pretty small. Maybe I do want to make it this narrow again. So, I think first I'm going to trace this. Okay. How's that look compared to this green line? Oh, it matches this edge, but not that one. Very interesting. So I think I'm taking out this excess here. I'm also going to trace this side. So it's inch, an inch, inch and a quarter, inch and 3/8. I think I'm going to go with this line and this line and see where that gets me. Now that we have it like that, compare. Yeah. Not sure about this, because I always end up curving out right here. But the original pattern piece doesn't. Okay, I'm going to take this piece off, trace this shape onto it, and try to reattach it. Let's see how that looks. This final sway back adjustment that I made was exactly what I needed for the corset to fit me properly. I'm super happy with the results. I love the fit. I love the way it hugs my body. I love the shape that it gives. I will be adding padding, as I said, to the bust, but it already fits me pretty well. There's a little space in the bust area to add that padding, and ready to use this as my lining. I still have a few adjustments and tweaks that I'll need to do to the denim as I start cutting those pieces out. I ordered the busk already and it came in, and it's a different size than the pattern pieces, so I'll have to adjust for that. I'm also going to order grommets so that I can get actual lacing in there, because what I have works, but it's pretty awkward. And then I will be ready to work on the final version of my corset mock-up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and watching my process, and are looking forward to seeing me make the rest of this corset. Thanks for watching! Is that fun?